Welcome to Fast Cars, Fast Girls. I'm your host, Abby Meyer, and this week we have with us Tim McGrane from M1 Concourse, which is quite the facility. But Tim, thanks so much for joining us this week.
Abby, you're welcome.
We're recording this a little early, but it'll drop closer to the Detroit Grand Prix. So we wanted to kind of coincide that because that's close to where your facility is located. You're up in Pontiac.
We are. So we're at the far end of Woodward Avenue in the city of Pontiac, and the Grand Prix being downtown Detroit. Well, actually Belle Isle. Next year they come back to downtown Detroit.
It's true.
They're at the south end of Woodward Avenue.
They are. So excellent. Yeah, I'm excited for it to come back downtown. I think that'll be a fun change.
It will be. I went to the event last year. I moved to Michigan the early part of last year. I had not been to the Grand Prix since it was last on the streets downtown. I think it was I think it was the first year that IndyCar was at Detroit, going back a number of years. So it will be exciting. There is something about a street race circuit.
There really is. We've had they added in Nashville this last year, and we've got that again this season. And there is just something very cool about a true street circuit.
Yes.
So not that Belle Isle wasn't beautiful. It is. It is a beautiful place to have a race. So tell me more about how you kind of got into racing. Did it start when you were? I think I read in some of your history that it started when you were even a young boy.
That's correct. In England, I grew up in the southeast of England. Cars or motorsports are a major sport. Out here it's football, basketball, baseball. In England, motorsports is depending upon the time of year, one of the top sports. My father was in the car business, and I just had a passion for cars from very early on. You say early on, I've got a picture of me on my 5th birthday in a pedal car that my parents bought me. And I was all very serious in this. And I suspect if I'd been passionate about soccer or cricket or something else, I would have had a picture of that on my birthday present. But I had this pedal car. It started at an early age and it continued right the way through. And then, a passion became an opportunity a number of years ago to start working in the business. I started in the collector car auction world as an actual position I took, but I volunteered for a local Chamber of Commerce committee when I lived in Palm Springs, and a group of us decided that, we all like cars and let's put on a vintage car race. How difficult could it be? We found out how difficult it could be, but it actually became successful, and that we brought in another promoter to run the event, and he brought in an auction company, and I got connected with a gentleman named Rick Cole, who had at the time, one of the leading auction companies, and that's how I ended up getting into the classic car auction business, which has taken me into different aspects of the racing world as well.
Excellent. Well, and there's just something about classic cars, they're called classics for a reason. They never go out of style. They always look good. I think even if you don't know anything about cars, you can appreciate a classic car.
That is true. There are certain events, and I suppose classic is, we all look at different cars differently, and what our determination of a classic is, and certainly, as the next generation comes around, when you get people and they look at cars from the 80s and the 90s and they go, well, that's a classic, and you're like, no, really, I was thinking of something from the 20s and the 30s or the 50s and 60s, but
yeah,
that's.
No, I agree with you. I think more, 50s, 60s, 20s, 30s. Yeah.
No.
So, well, excellent. So, when you were growing up, who was your favorite driver?
As a kid growing up in England, and I never got to watch him race, but he was, an idol, and he passed away much too soon at racing. There was a driver by the name of Jim Clark. But because he wasn't, because again, he got killed racing. Probably during my school days, Jackie Stewart He raced for the Tyrrell team, which was the top team at the time. He was British. He was winning world championships. He checked all the boxes as a schoolboy sort of idol from a point of view of drivers. And another person that had retired but still was very prominent in the press was Sterling Moss. And that went on really to the end of Sterling's life, which was only just recently that he passed away. But probably in school, Jackie Stewart would have been the idol.
Gotcha. Would have been your favorite.
Yes.
Excellent. So you have gotten to experience all different sides of motorsports, which seems kind of perfect for your current facility because you have all kinds of different events there. So tell the listeners a little bit more about the M1 Concourse facility.
Okay. So M1, as I mentioned earlier, we're located in the city of Pontiac. We're at the south part of Pontiac, right on Woodward Avenue. We're an 87-acre, what we classify as an entertainment and motorsports venue. So we have a 1.5 mile, 11-turn, high-performance driving track. Wasn't designed for wheel-to-wheel racing. So the type of performance driving it's done on here is either sort of sports cars. But we do one event. Our big signature event of the year is an event called the American Speed Festival. Happens the first weekend in October. And what we do is put together 10 classes of cars that do timed runs or demonstration runs. There's a number of events in Europe, and they come under the classification of hill climb. We don't have a hill here, and we use the complete circuit. But it allows us to get a real cross-section of cars out on the track to show them to the spectators how they operate under speed. Now, some cars, given their value or their historical significance, again, put at demonstration runs. But because they're not under wheel-to-wheel competition, it allows a lot more cars to be showcased. We were very fortunate last year that Jim Hall sent out 4 of the Chaparral cars from the museum in Midland, Texas. That hasn't happened in a long time. You very rarely see you haven't seen more than one car run. So again, it was a format that allows us. So we have vintage Indy cars, and vintage could be anything from Indy cars from the 60s right the way up through the 80s. We had some Formula One cars. The Henry Ford Museum sent over what's called their sweepstakes car, the sort of the 1901 tribute car, and lots of cars in between. So that's the format of the track that we have here. Now we do other events here. It's not our event, but Motor Trend magazine in conjunction with Dodge actually bring back the traditional old drag racing right on Woodward Avenue. They close a section of Woodward Avenue in front of M1. They do an event called Roadkill Nights. That happens here. And then the following weekend, we do our big Woodward Dream Show, which is the Friday before Woodward Dream Cruise each year on the Saturday.
Wonderful. So that's very cool. The event that's at the end of October where you get to see all those different classes and types of cars. What's been one of your favorites to see?
Well, I must admit, seeing the two high wing Chaparral cars, come around the first time when they were on the track last year was certainly one of those very memorable moments. There were 3 cars on. One was Jim Hall's, what's known as the USRRC championship winning car, and then his other 2 high wing cars. Another special moment, and this wasn't at an event, it was actually a private track test day. But we were, the Penske organization had rented the track for a day, and it turned out that Roger Penske was coming out, and he was going to drive, or he drove, the Porsche RS Spider that won the Sebring 12 Hours. And then Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford Motor Company, was going to drive Penske Motorsports Australian V8 supercar championship winning car, the Scott McLaughlin car.
Yeah.
And they were doing a test day because the cars were soon after that going to go on a plane and go over to the Goodwood Festival of Speed, where both Roger Penske and Jim Farley were running those 2 cars up the Goodwood Hill. So that was a special moment. Other interesting things that happened here. You're talking about the Detroit Grand Prix. Last year, and that's an event that has an IMSA race included in it. So last year, I think the event before, a Swiss-based Lamborghini team had an incident and they wanted to do some testing. So they called us up, or the organizers of the Lamborghini series called us up and said, could this team come out? They wanted to come out and make sure they had the car set up properly for Detroit. Fortunately, they came here and they went down to Detroit, and I think they came home with second place, a second place finish. So
not too shabby. That's wonderful. That's a great benefit to those teams to have you that close to be able to do that.
Yeah.
That's very cool about Roger Penske and the CEO of GM coming out to test drive some cars.
It was the CEO of Ford.
CEO of Ford. Sorry.
We better not get those mixed up.
I better not. CEO of Ford. Excuse me. Very cool. Very cool. And then I read that you and your wife went on a tour of basically just automobile museums.
That's correct. I used to run an automotive museum in Northern California called the Black Hawk Museum in Danville. In fact, I was there twice. So having a lifelong passion for cars and having been in the museum business, you sort of, you never leave that business. There's just something about the museum world that always strikes a passion. So we always make a point when we go somewhere to sort of see those car museums. And, during the shutdown with the pandemic, we were in Arizona at the time, and we decided, we'd go and see as many museums as we could. And there's a museum guide out there, and we tried to check it off. So we actually came here. We went to the Detroit Museum. We went to Philadelphia, see the Simeone Museum. Got on a plane, went over to Newport, Rhode Island, see the Audrain and the Newport Car Museum. So that is something that's fun, and I'm extremely fortunate that my wife enjoys what I find very passionate as well.
You are very fortunate.
My trade-off that her family heritage is in the aviation world, so we always have to go make sure there's aviation museums around, which I love as well.
Well, that's not a bad trade-off.
Yeah.
I find that most people that enjoy racing also enjoy aviation. It's still cool things going fast.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, I loved when we had the air race here at IMS. That was just
that would have been interesting to watch. I'd been to Reno a few times during the Reno air races, but I've read articles about the Red Bull races that used to happen at IMS. That would have been interesting to watch.
It was very fun. One of the coolest things was they had a trick helicopter. And there are only 2 pilots in the world that are certified to fly this type of helicopter, and they could do backflips in it and all of these things that defy the laws of physics. But yeah.
No, I remember
very
going,
cool.
You go to Reno and you look at what those planes are doing, and I studied engineering in college, so I think I have a pretty good understanding of most things mechanical, and you look at it and you go, that just shouldn't be able to do that.
Yes, that's how I felt about the helicopter. I'm like,
without exploding.
Yes, I just don't feel like this should be able to work. But yeah, aviation museums, not a bad trade-off. What was one of your favorite museums that you've been to?
There is one outside Tucson, and name slips my mind. It's a warbird museum. And given that it's in Arizona, and the climate is very forgiving for outside displays, and they've got a lot of real estate out there, they have some pretty unique and some of those really enormous planes, military planes from the 50s that you just look at and you go, you can't imagine that they thought, okay, let's build something this big. That was a fun venture. It was also a very hot day out in the Arizona desert, but that's always fun. And when we go back to England, I always like to feel there's a place in England called Duxford, which is sort of the epicenter of warbirds in the United Kingdom. And going to sort of Duxford is always great. There used to be a museum in Santa Monica, the Museum of Flying. It was at Santa Monica Airport. But it was a small one, but they had some really neat planes there. For a couple of years, I was in the auction company I worked for. We did a warbird auction. We did one in Santa Monica, and they did one up in Reno. And that was an interesting experience.
I bet. I bet. Now, I hear that you're coming to the Indy 500 this year.
Yes.
So
Didn't make it last year. Obviously, it sort of got moved, but heading over there Thursday of next week, and really looking forward to it.
excellent. Oh, good. So you'll be here for Carb Day and the whole weekend.
Yes, there's I think the Thursday evening there's the old timers dinner, so we'll be going to that, and then the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum. I understand they got a new exhibit there. As a card carrying member of the museum for a number of years, I always make a point of stopping by there, and then it's going to be great to see, what the speedway, hopefully back to full capacity, having
Yes.
running Laguna Seca when I did for that period of time. I got to know the Doug Bowles, who's the president of Indianapolis Speedway Museum. So always the opportunity to go over there on a 500 weekend should be fun.
Absolutely. No, Doug's a great guy. He's a great steward and a promoter for IMS. But yeah, I absolutely love the Hall of Fame Museum. Yeah. It became kind of a joke in my family that everybody knew if I picked you up from the airport and we had a couple of hours to kill, we were probably going to get Mexican food at my favorite Mexican restaurant here in town, and we were definitely going to hit the Hall of Fame Museum because there's always different cars when you go, so you can go multiple times per year. Yeah,
that should be good. And now that the speedway is fortunate to have a custodian in Roger Penske.
Absolutely.
It's going to be, I think, exciting. The fact that he acquired it and then the pandemic hit was a shame. But I think it will be great to see, that place, with at full speed, with the Roger factor in place and everybody on his team.
Absolutely. No, and he does an excellent job of choosing good team members.
Yeah.
I mean, he has to. He's only one man. But it is remarkable what he and his team have done, and I'm excited for them because they didn't really get to show off all their hard work even last year since it wasn't at full capacity. So yeah, I'm excited for this year. I think it'll be a great year.
I don't think anybody predicted the winner from last year. So I think that, it has to be a fan's favorite. It's been a long time since there's a chance of a 5-time winner actually happening.
Yeah.
I do remember it's probably been a really long time since I've shouted at the TV at the last few laps of a race, but I remember doing that last year. That was an epic finish.
It was an epic finish. Oh, it was a very, very exciting finish. There are very few years that I'm not shouting at the end of that race, I feel. At least none in recent memory. Yeah. So will you be in the pagoda, or where are you sitting on race day?
I'm going to be enjoying it. So I'm going over there as an invited guest with a group, which I'm very fortunate to be part of.
Excellent. Well, if you are, and I'll tell you, wherever they are, they're all good. Yeah. They're all an excellent time. So you'll be going more as a spectator with this group.
Yes. No, I have no responsibilities.
Oh, that's the best way to go. Yeah. Well, if you see me out, I'll be wearing a checkered dress. Feel free to say hi. Yeah. I also am a spectator on race day. Yeah. I do some media responsibilities early in the morning, and then after that, it's time for Bloody Marys and race day festivities.
No, it's going to be exciting. Obviously, the following weekend, and as you say, IndyCar comes to Detroit. For that event here, where we have a good relationship with the team at the Detroit Grand Prix. Obviously, it's an event that has the IMSA. Another thing that's added this year is they're bringing the historic endurance cars to the Belle Isle event. So that should be good because some of those guys run at our American Speed Festival and the Vintage Indy Racing Organization. They aren't doing a Vintage Indy Day at the 500 this year. I think they were going to Road America next. But it's always good to see some of the older drivers or past sort of participants in the 500. I know a good friend of mine, she's actually going to be one of our speaker series guests later in the year. Linson James, I'll always, spend some time with her over the 500 weekend. She's actually going to be in Detroit coming up soon. She's been inducted into the Automotive Hall of Fame, I think, in June. So
Excellent. Excellent.
She's our speaker series that we do the first Saturday each month here. She's coming here in September.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah, that's a great opportunity to hear her speak. Yeah, she's got wonderful stories and experience. She certainly does. Now, okay, so your two big events. We've got the one that's in October, and that's the Speed Fest, correct?
The American Speed Festival, which this year we're celebrating 60 years of Shelby American, and all the things that Carroll Shelby was involved with. And we're also celebrating 75 years of Ferrari. So we're not doing a Ford versus Ferrari theme. We're just doing the two respective celebrations. And then we do a Master of Motorsports honoree. And this year our Master of Motorsports is Peter Brock. Peter was the designer that created the Shelby Cobra Daytona Coupe that they went on to win the World Championship with. And Peter's going to be our honoree for Master of Motorsports at American Speed Festival. And then earlier in August, the third week in August, when we do our Woodward Dream Show, we're recognizing or celebrating 90 years of the 1932 Ford Model B, what's known as sort of the Deuce. Certainly probably a car that most is most celebrated in the hot rod world. So we're going to do 90 years of the Deuce, all versions, 100 years of the Lincoln brand, and there's a couple of Lincoln models that were very much, or still are very much, used by customizers. There's the Lincoln Zephyr, the big Lincoln Zephyr coupe that's changed a lot, and then the mid-60s Lincoln Continentals that are mostly in sort of the resto mod category. So we're doing that. And as we're located in the city of Pontiac, we always try and find a Pontiac model or something in the Pontiac history that we can celebrate. And this year's is 55 years of the Firebird.
Oh, wow. That's excellent. I like that tradition since you are in Pontiac. That's a wonderful, wonderful thing to do. So 55 years of the Firebird.
Yeah.
What a fun car.
Yeah, absolutely, isn't it? I mean, there's, whether it's the early ones, the 60s ones, or it's, you either love it or you don't, but you can't take away the Smokey and the Bandit Firebird. You probably did more for Trans Ams and Firebirds than any other model.
Yeah, I don't recall ever seeing a Firebird that I didn't like the look of it.
Yeah.
Well, excellent. Where's the best way for folks to find you guys online? Website or social media?
So on so M1 Concourse is our main site. So it's M1 Concourse, and that's the number one, concourse.com. Or each of the events has their own separate website. So it's americanspeedfestival.com or woodwarddreamshow.com.
Excellent.
Excellent. And tickets are available now. We put some multi-day packages together for Speed Festival. We've got a program going for car clubs to be invited in advance of Woodward Dream Show on the Friday when we do the big event. On the Saturday, which is the day of the Woodward Dream Cruise, we're actually going to open up M1 to invited car clubs they can use as a base for their car corral. But in the morning, we're going to do an escorted parade of about 200 cars from the car clubs to leave M1, go up and around what they call the Woodward Loop that goes around Pontiac. We'll go downtown Pontiac and stop for a sort of a photo opportunity, and then come escorted back to M1. And then they could spend the day here or can go out and cruise Woodward if they wish.
Oh, well, that sounds like a wonderful time.
Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
You have to decide how much time you want to devote. So last year was my first year at Woodward Dream Cruise, and on the Friday evening, we decided to see what it was like. So we went from Pontiac, so we're all the way at the north part. We never made it down to Ferndale, which is the south part of the cruise. I think we got the best of Royal Oak and turned around. And what should have been a 40-minute drive took the better part of 4 hours.
Oh, goodness. Oh, yeah. Say a little more time than you had planned.
A lot of fun cars. There's everything and anything that's out there.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Funny story about me. I actually, when I was learning how to drive, we had a 1959 Ford Edsel, and so that is actually the car that I learned how to drive in.
That's neat.
It is. I think, I'm probably in single digits of people that actually like the Edsel, but it's because I have, a little nostalgia attached to it.
I will say, time is very kind to cars that maybe weren't much loved and appreciated, when they first came around. But there's pretty much some type of appreciation society, owners club or fan club to most makes and models or categories of cars, which is wonderful because you get to see, all manner of cars out there. But yeah, that's a good thing about time. The unloved in their day certainly have an appreciation and an afterlife.
They do. No, when we were looking, we eventually sold it, and there was no shortage of Edsel groups, people that absolutely loved Edsels.
Yeah.
So yeah,
we could all find opportunities if you had the ability to go back in time to whatever era and buy cars that for 10 cents on the dollar, because back in the day they were after their the first couple of years, oh, here comes the Canadian National 339. Anyway, if there was a period long before there was such thing as historic racing. Old race cars were old race cars and they had no use. There was no way you could use them. So they just got discarded at discount prices. And now these cars are priceless. You go back and look through old issues of Road and Track magazine or any of those magazines from that era. And, you just wish you could time travel back with one's checkbook and pick up a few.
If only.
Yeah, really.
If only. Yeah, that would be. That would be priceless. So what's your favorite, what are some of your favorite classic cars?
Well, I've been, fortunate, whether it's the time in the classic car world or the time running in museums, that I've been sort of exposed and had the privilege of driving a real cross section of cars. So, whether it's cars from the late 20s or early 30s or from the 50s and 60s. Sports cars, predominantly European sports cars. I would say if you get back into the sort of 30s, obviously pre-war Bentleys and Rolls-Royce Silver Ghosts, but anything from that era I just think is wonderful. From the American side, you got Packards and Duesenbergs, and like a lot of cars, they can be really nice until they become temperamental and don't run properly, and then all of a sudden you don't like them quite as much as you thought you did. From the sports car era, probably as a kid, a GT40 was iconic, the Jaguar D-Type, and Aston Martin's Le Mans winning car from the late 50s, the 1959 DBR1. But there are a lot of cars out there that would be on my list. It would be a very long list.
I can understand that. There are a lot. I would have quite a long list as well.
Yeah.
I agree with you. There is just something about those cars from the 20s and 30s that they just have a very regal appearance.
Yeah. And they, you do have to drive them. I mean, nowadays, nearly, there isn't a bad car out there. Every car is so well made at all levels. But you get a classic car, it's an experience. It's it can be unpredictable. Sometimes we save, and they always seem to get what they call stage fright before they're either supposed to go up for an award. There's a bit of a joke among sort of people who own British cars. You can always tell somebody that owns an English car, especially an older sports car, is that they never put the seatbelt on until the engine has started, because It doesn't always start, and that means you just got to take your seatbelt off to get out and work out what's gone wrong with it. But it's just the character of driving older cars, and
It is. It is.
it's not for everybody. That's why there's the world of resto mods. People, you want to drive around in a 59 or a 64 Corvette, but you don't want the mechanicals or the creature comforts from those days. You want air conditioning, you want good suspension, you want sort of better power and performance. So it's over the decades, it's generated this whole sort of resto mod world, which when you look at any of the auctions, either in person or online, you can see that people really like that. They like to drive older cars, but they want the modern experience still.
Yeah, no, there is a lot to be said for that, and a huge market for it, because like you said, you can have that experience of driving the older car, but not the unpredictability. Without that unpredictability factor.
And I think for those of us who had sort of older cars back then, what we remember and how it was is always slightly different. I've known friends that have wanted to go back and buy the car they had back in the day, and they buy it and then they go, this wasn't quite what I was remembering it was. Well, it's not quite as good. So
yeah, say little rose-colored glasses when you're looking back on it.
Yeah.
My dad always he learned how to drive in a Packard, and so he always lusted after Packards whenever we'd see them at car shows and things. And yes, so I'd love to have a Packard again.
Packards are wonderful. When I first came over, I wasn't familiar with the Packard brand, and they make great cars, but it's when you drive them you realize how wonderful they are, and that was their advertising slogan, I think, was ask a man who owns one, or ask a man who drives one. And if the Classic Car Club of America does a number of what they call caravans, where their owners groups will drive different parts of the country. And there are more Packards in any of those driving events than most other marques, because they're nice to drive, and they're a lot more reliable. So those are great cars.
They are. And they're not bad to look at either.
No. some of them, they made some stunning. The ones with custom coach work on are absolutely stunning. Some examples. I've been, going to Pebble Beach Concourse for many years, which for most people is probably the top international classic car event. And if they have a Packard as a feature, or there's a Packard class, whether it's pre-war or post-war, I should say, pre-war, whether it's coach build or factory built, and there are some stunning examples.
Absolutely. All right, well, I will let you go, but I want to ask you just a couple more questions. So number one, who do you think is going to win the 500?
Oh.
Or who would you like to win the 500?
I'm gonna have to say I would like to see Helia do it again. So we go five time. I think that would be. Now that being said, there's lots of other. When I ran Laguna Seca, I got to Simon Pagenaud was somebody I got to know. I think the most important thing, it's exciting. It was a safe race, because motor racing is dangerous at any level, even with all the safety thing. It's an exciting race. And I'd be okay with Helia winning.
I'd be okay with that as well. I'm a huge Simon Pagenaud fan, so I'd be okay for him to get his second win also. Yeah. No. I'd be just fine with that. So.
But Colton's. He had a good run, albeit a very, very wet road course last weekend. So we'll see. But it's the 500. Anything can happen.
Anything can happen. You just don't know. Just kind of depends. Yeah, we have a saying, which is the track chooses the winner.
There we go.
So, all right. Well, Tim, thank you so very much for joining us. Appreciate it. And if you're heading up to the Detroit Grand Prix up at Belle Isle, make sure to go a little bit further up to Pontiac and check it out. Hit up the American Speed Festival in October, and then it was the Woodruff.
Woodward. named after
Woodward.
the Woodward Avenue,
There
Woodward
we
Dream
go.
Show in the third weekend in August.
There we go. Make sure to check that out. Lots of cool car things. That's just a short drive from Indianapolis. So thanks so much for listening.